like to say hello to everybody. This is week 3 for our cultural protocols coverage. Tonight's area is primarily around cultural safety. And what I've done is we've got 10 protocols, and we've kind of covered the first few on the first week. The next, we've covered quite a few last week. And this week, we're going to try and get through to the end of the document. It's very brief in regards to what we're covering, um, but this is just at the, I guess, introductory, to our cultural protocols and cultural principles as well. I'd like to acknowledge all our elders, um, like to acknowledge past and present, and just want to acknowledge all the elders that are tuning in tonight. And there's quite a lot of mob tuning in from around the country as well. So a big hello to everybody. And yeah, just like to start this session and just also just to remind people from the last couple of times that I've done these is that a lot of these cultural protocols mob know. This is especially my age, and this is an opportunity to hand on to younger mob, and while we got the guidance of the cultural mob and elders and stuff with us to guide us through documenting correctly. And the whole objective is to have cultural safety pretty much for everybody, for our mob um, wanting to engage in culture. They'll have an idea on how to do that safely, and yeah, to explore that. So we covered. Can you see the screen behind me? Baya, in it? On beat? Okay. All right. So cultural safety. This is basically a um, 10 point protocols, and this is kind of something that I envisaged to reach these 10 points, and I'd only reached the 10th point today. I kind of left that open to try and find what was really the 10th point, and I feel like I found it. Um, for this, for what we need and what's realistic for what we're needing, as tools, I guess, to get us through the next chapters and the next years. So, yeah, so that kind of came to me today, and I've kind of been writing this document as we go because it's kind of like a big job, and I didn't really have the time to kind of just do it any other way. And it's been kind of helpful as well to um, do it this way because I've been able to get feedback um, from mob around the place, and it sounds like there is a demand for this. So it's kind of encouraged me to finish the job. So for this cultural protocol document, it is a finished document now. I guess it's like a little ebook, and it's going to be anybody who wants to have a copy um, can inbox the Vote No page or my page, or and we just get it out there. And from the feedback I'm getting, even when it wasn't completed, we're getting feedback, say, from WA Mob or Pilbara Mob, and they're starting to look at these protocols and look at ways that they can apply it to their dance groups and so forth. So that's very positive, which means it's a document that can be useful and, for outcomes for mobs. So that's really, really nice news to hear. Um, Again, these are protocols that belong, these are our mobs protocols. I'm just articulating in a way as best as I can, but they have existed. So this is the first page. We're just going to recap because we're going to take off from where we left off last week, and that will be the document finished. But just to recap, going through the first section, cultural protocols. Just to recap, cultural protocols are our old ways still currently being honoured by many communities. It is a way to let mob know what the old rules are in regards to public discussions, engagements, cultural representations, and so forth. I always write these little notes here. It is a human right to uphold and honour our cultural rights. Cultural principles. Cultural protocols are sets of principles from old cultural law systems that are still being practiced today. Cultural customs, which is inclusive of moral principles, are what guide our old ways to continue with honour and respect. They are inclusive of natural law, hence sovereignty, which is why the time has come to document such important principles to sustain the autonomy of our nations and clans' rights to culturally continue and exist with cultural harmony set up by those before us. Cultural protocols. So this is the finished protocols here. Here's the 10 of them there. So we covered on the first week, first, second, third points, pretty much, about understanding our our cultures, our many languages. Our many nations. Sorry, and understanding the tribal systems that still exist in this country. Quite a few still from the old cultural system from before colonisation. Many are still have continued on with these old cultural systems, and is a way of just sort of defining a little bit of respect to get out of their way a bit because they've been around for thousands of years and continuing on and so we just want to uphold and make sure that we are not in the way of that. So we looked at number 4, like the men's, women's business. We're not looking at anything to do with sacred stuff or tribal or anything that is not for public consumption. We just looked at the principles, that men deal with men stuff and women deal with women stuff in general stuff in community, that kind of stuff continued on. Yeah. So then we looked at representations. Nations and clans, family represent and speak for themselves. So not one mob can speak for another, as we know, and that's been practiced. And that kind of is reaffirmed again from the first point, understanding the different mobs and the different nations. So can't speak for another person's country. Basically, it's not respectful. If he was given permission, that would be another thing. And we have got the permission pathways and mandates. How to do that. Last week was all cultural sensitivity because the nature of our community and so forth. So we put all the cultural sensitivity in last week, and where we kind of left off is there because the next point is coming on to the disputes, conflict resolution, cultural safety, which is pretty much the whole sum of it. Cultural rights and communal rights is just an awareness of it. I've decided not to go way too big on that stuff because I really think that's kind of for the next level. I think this is for where we're at level, introductory, level 1. I think the information needs to stay at that level. So there is way more information to go, but I think that needs to happen at a later stage when people have kind of worked their way through this stuff. So that will be done obviously more in depth, and I think definitely later. Okay, someone's ringing my bell downstairs. Just go down the stairs and check who it is. Okay, so I've done a breakdown, and this is for everybody to have a copy of, whoever wants to have a copy. And so basically these are just breakdowns here of the 10 points that we looked at in the 10 protocols. Hang on. Yeah. Come in, Bob. I'm just live on TikTok, so just letting you know. Yeah, so come and join in. Alrighty, so we are now at disputes, conflict resolutions. So That's very brief because there's kind of some basic ways that a mob kind of deal with stuff. So, for example, disputes over cultural matters happen quite often. Um, Many disputes are dissolved using appropriate cultural pathways, and some of these are. For example, if there's disputes with women's issues, it's culturally appropriate that a woman would address a woman. It's not culturally appropriate that a man address a woman and then be aggressive about it and then be violent. That's happened, and as we would know, that is way not acceptable. Women deal with women and so forth. Men take up their issues with the men, and then when if some of that is unresolved, elders' input is usually where it does get resolved from, and anything past that probably needs to go to police and authority. So they're kind of like cultural pathways to know how to handle conflicts. Um, I think it's very important um, to understand who has the cultural authority. And so, for example, if someone has cultural authority and they've kicked up about something, it is what it is. You have to stand down and, you know, listen to the cultural, take heed of the cultural authority, so depending on the situation. I think having these itemize the protocols and stuff too. I think it kind of helps identify what that cultural authority would be. For example, if you was to say, you know, put on an event and you've got permissions from certain elders and you've told you know, what's happening at the event and so forth, then there is a cultural authority that's come through that mandate. Yeah. So very important to understand just kind of how it all works, and it really happens from that protocol document. Um, and I think also that protocol document can act like, if we're looking at these points here, I think it's a very good way of just um, a checklist. Having an event coming up, have a quick look. Have we covered everything? I think it's also to, you know, when it comes to disputes, identify um, what could be it's usually cultural sensitivities that make a conflict. So it's great to identify what could be cultural disputes that may arise. For example, there could be one family is not happy with another family or so forth, and you can do planning around that. Make sure that they're seated separately, or there's space, or both families have a platform, or what have you. You know, there's ways of, you know, culturally safe ways to make peace at cultural events and be fair and so forth. So that's just anything. Yeah. So we've got where issues are way more complex, or if moved towards violence, it is important to let the retrospective authorities know. What we have an issue with when it comes to um, the jurisdiction of our culture, it is out of jurisdiction. And so what's happening at the moment, and I do understand where all these yes mob were coming from, but I just do believe that it was compromising our human rights way too much. But there's a jurisdiction issue, and I do believe it does need to be sorted out. And I think these protocols might guide that jurisdiction a bit more safer. So anything out of jurisdiction, for example, for anything that's a cultural breach and completely outside of our cultural protocols, is out of is in jurisdiction to the system, as far as I'm concerned, because they're not, you know, coming out of jurisdiction to be on our cultural proper old ways, then we they have to go back into jurisdiction into the white system. Otherwise, they become lawless, if you know what I mean. So there does need to be law and order. So I do understand where the yes mob was coming from, but the way to get there was not the ideal way at all, and it was completely culturally unsafe, which is what's kind of led me as well to drive me down this pathway to be to be so called out of jurisdiction and to see government just come along and all of a sudden after the 2023 referendum, we are like divided as a community, not not just as a mental state, like as an actual status of sovereignty. We are actually separated by our sovereignty statuses thanks to that referendum, and the government didn't have a right to go and do that to us. I really think that was a grand cultural breach, and it should never have been allowed to happen. That we can be divided in such a way, politically and status-wise. So I think in the future, I would like to see the government show a bit more respect around our mobs. Um, we have to do it. So should they, in regards to just infiltrating to get their agenda. Like we all want the same outcomes in this country in regards to we want cultural safety and we want mob to have a good life and stuff. So, but it is the pathway that we get there, and I think that the pathway the government take is just a little bit too callous for the nature of our mob, because our mob are pretty much, benefit of the doubt mob, just think genuinely in good faith, and a lot of people that come to us doing will and dealing and this and that don't have the same intentions as our people. So, and I think in regards to that, I think it comes down to if they could respect our protocols more. I think we would have definitely a better platform to start with communication and so forth. But for us, we can't be expecting the government to clean us up because we'll get usurped on that pathway. Oh, yeah, no, they'll fix it. Oh, United Nations will fix it. Oh, yeah, let's get usurped to them too. No, we can't get usurped to anybody. We've lost so much, and we've lost way too much, and it's at unacceptable levels. And I think it's now time to definitely lock down on our cultural protocols. Our cultural law is taboo. It's not to be. It's not a public consumption topic. We've got our tribal terms that we refer to, for our cultural law. They are not public consumption terms. Um, that people know about them as you refer to it, but it's not. It's not a thing to name drop. So I really want to make a point about all of us more coming back into cultural pathway and just maybe just kind of cleaning up in that area. But it seems to be that it's being received by our elders, which is a really good importance because we need our elders to get us through, whatever chapters we are going through. They have the experience, the wisdom. They've been through so many changes with the government in the past. They've seen us come, straight from old bush ways, and then we're here, and they have more knowledge than we kind of not giving credit for, but like than we're utilizing. I think we could utilize our elders in regards to our directions a lot more. Um, and instead of like this whole political, get these little political parties up and these fellas do that and that, and it starts stripping off our culture a lot because a lot of the movements are controlled by white political parties with their agendas and their monies and their everything and their deals they've done. And it's we kind of got to get away from building ourselves into these kind of structures because they aren't really protective and they're not culturally safe. So that's what we got to start doing, is looking down on our cultural safety. All right, so cultural safety is kind of like an anti-bullying strategy or an anti-bullying policy. Cultural safety consists of three categories for human autonomy. Physical safety, you have to be physically safe. You have to be able to go to an event or go and physically be safe. Mental safety is very important. And I think with mental safety, especially we've got a lot of more because of, I do believe, I blame colonialism for the way that our mental health is impacted. We got colonized too fast. They kind of did whatever they was doing in America, and they were 500 years advanced on us, on being colonized, and they just come in and threw stuff at us, and we collapsed under it. A lot of us, a lot of mob stayed strong and kept up, but a lot of mob went down, and a lot of families, myself included, like in regards to my journey, I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD, so I've been collecting along my journey lots of traumas, mostly in community. A lot of not just in community in regards to blaming my mob, but a pathway through community and for example, engaging with the hospital services and being declined support or getting declined all kinds of support. It becomes a mental strain, especially when the condition is a mental condition in the first place. But a lot of for example, like with me, complex PTSD is trauma, and a lot of mob. You hear a lot of I don't know. I've heard sort of corporate blackfellas or what have you get up and say, oh, we don't have like what do you call it, like transgenerational trauma. We don't have that, and it's like, why would you not have that? Like, if, for example, if you just look at the stolen generation, that just them mob, like, you take children away from their parents, and it's not like they were placed safely somewhere. Maybe somewhere, but we know so many stories, and hundreds of stories of mob being terrorized, abused, and brutalized, and treated like they were in concentration camps. So that you know what I mean. So, and then these poor fellows was raised like that, and then they have children and when we got problems, and so we get blamed for the problems that we didn't create, but we are also stuck with fixing the problem. But it not only just with the stolen generation mob too, like just the mob, just everybody, like just being able to have equal opportunity. People just think, oh no, that happens in this country and what have you, but it really don't. Like, for example, when I was living out in the desert and out Coolgardie ways and stuff like that, the attitude out there when I first got out there, I come from like going overseas, traveling and getting treated like royalty in South America and what have you, and then go out to Kalgoorlie and Coolgardie to live, and it was like stand back with a black attitude at the shops, and it was really confronting. And they didn't care if you had money in your bank or if you was working. I was working as a teacher, Aboriginal teacher at the school. And they didn't really care if you were driving a nice car. As you're black, stand back. And that was pretty much the attitude I got confronted with. And so for mob to say, oh, equality exists in this country and everything's all great. No, it's not. It's not. And you can see it's reflection. And, and we've got a situation also in this country where our children are kicking up. They are kicking up. And it's confronting and people don't like it. But, we've got to look at the journey that led them there and the journey of the parents of what they're dealing with too. And some of the stuff that's going on, even with the parents, if there was like human rights actually being practiced, we kind of wouldn't have had the problems um, exacerbate as much as they have. That's all. So, but it's not a blame game. But we can't, if they want to, we are getting the blame for our own issues, and all we have to do, I guess, is take responsibility for how we can contribute to get through this. But we aren't the problem, and we went the blame of this. I just want to be clear of it, even though we are happy to help come forward and come through our issues. We aren't we aren't responsible for the desecration that was thrown on our feet. We're just not, and it was very unfair. So, anyways, going back to mental safety, I also want to just go again on mental awareness, knowing that mob have been through a lot, and just also the stigma. Oh, mental health. Like, um, why would you do that to people going through genocide? Like, they're going through genocide and still going through it. We're still losing. It's not like we've got land and houses and everything just given to us. We ended up getting stripped of that. We kind of started off with that, and we ended up with kind of a lot of us getting nothing out of the whole journey of this colonialism. Some black fellas become millionaires on the journey, mostly corporate ones, but the rest of us got nothing out of it. So and we got the mental scars of trying to stay afloat, and also like a lot of the mental scars, that we've endured, say in the movement, were unnecessary cultural breaches, from certain parties. Had there, and I kind of wish that we had a cultural protocol document prior, but we never really had a position of to to get it out. Like before in the movement, if you did anything, it was a threat, and someone else was in, wanted to have their podium, and the next minute you had all these mob coming for you, and that's pretty much what the movement's been. It's been the most unsafe space in my journey. I've been in performing arts. That's unsafe too. In some spaces as well, but the sovereignty movement was particularly unsafe because we didn't have protocols to guide us through, and because of um, mob finding their own space or their own autonomy, and most people was genuine, but we had a lot of people that infiltrated the movement, particularly just to usurp on behalf of the government, literally. So that's the reality. So what came with that was lateral violence, to violence, and that impacts on mental safety. And the only issue that was ever, I guess, was a problem is just, trying to, for our mob to have our cultural rights. Like, it's not a sin to have your cultural rights. It's a human right to have our cultural rights. And so from here on, we should be culturally safe. We have to um, find our way to become culturally safe. This document will certainly help mob. I've applied it to my life because of my family being particularly attacked over cultural stuff, over mob breaching. Didn't even have a cultural authority to even breach in the first place, or so forth. So I'm hoping that this is going to start being the end of an era of some of that, and I do believe some of it grew out of the sovereignty movement. It became like a lawless area, um, and so now we can't just take off and leave that open, and we kind of need to bring it home back to our culture, and make sure that we progress into the future with, you know, I guess the same mindset that we've had before political kind of invasion came into our space, where mob respected each other. It was kind of naturally happening, in the past. I do think that some of the stuff that happens, or, again, is coming from paid people, not the government. And that's got to stop. Because we all want the same thing for this country, you know what I mean? So I've just put down here, so that's spiritual safety. That's really important. There is a link between mental and spiritual, but it is separate. For example, with my journey with, say, PTSD, it's like sometimes, it's like your brain is a malfunction. You have to kind of repair and heal and stuff, in cycles. It's my spirituality that's kind of kept me strong and kept me going through some of that challenges. So there is a separate, it is a separate space, a separate thing. And I just want mob to be aware of that. Um, Being spiritually unsafe can cause mental issues for sure. But I just want mob to know that anything that's come out of, like, from trauma and stuff, it's kind of like its own thing as well, even though there is a link. But just with our mob, with the mental safety, for example, if you have, like, say, violators of, of cultural protocols, um, that is that can cause, like spiritual unrest with our mob, and then spiritual safety can be compromised. So I can't really go deeper than that. But I think if you just get the drift, like it is separate. Oh yeah, next time I'll use it next time. Yeah, thanks. Leave it there. All right. So cultural authority. Um, Important to know your rights culturally, like where you stand, did you get permission, and so forth. So you have a cultural authority to progress. So it's very important to just to go through these protocols. Do I have a cultural authority to proceed? Am I supported by my elders, and are they, so forth. It's quite simple, and it is really important to keep the simplicity of that, because our culture is simple, even though it's layered and quite intricate. It's simple. It's simplicity in regards to how it all works at the same time. Communal rights is it's linked to cultural authority as well, and communal rights is pretty much like it's about all mobs' rights together. Say one mob all share a dance together, they have shared rights over that dance, and it's communal rights or language. They all mobs speak the same language, so they have a cultural authority and also a cultural right to speak their language and so forth. If you are going outside your cultural area, again, it always comes back to permission and getting that mandate. It's going out to the sea mob, whatever, and getting that permission. It's that's the practice that we expect. If you go and visit mob, don't go and visit mob and make out that you're sharing, but you're taking. Because we're a sharing kind of mob. But we don't. There's not. It doesn't mean you can go to someone's country and take something. That is absolutely not okay. Grand cultural breach, can't do. And that's basically where we're heading into cultural appropriation, which is the final point. And I left that 10th point for a while. I was thinking, because you could call it so many things, 10, but I think cultural appropriation is something that we're living with, something that is happening, and I think it needs to be put down. Because you're not allowed to take from mob without permission. If you have permission, um, that is fine, but to take without permission and to think that you can just take whatever you want is not okay. It is stealing, and I think I would like to see in the future, like these kind of guidelines, grow into boundaries, like strict boundaries that people come along and breach, like blatantly breach, can be prosecuted under the full force of the law, because we shouldn't have to be forced to go into cultural law to punish these people. You know what I mean? And we all know that would end up disastrous. So I do believe we need a prosecution pathway for the cultural breaches, like extreme stuff, especially where it causes physical harm, spiritual harm, and mental harm. Anything that crosses the boundary of cultural safety. And that, I mean, that would have to be extreme cases because, but I think this is the direction for here, like just to at least for mob to know. Um, so, because I think sometimes, like, if you don't know, how could you know not to do it? So, I think this is kind of like the place where we start and keep it culturally safe, and just also mob. I think just want to just remind mob about the cultural sensitivity and what's for public consumption when it isn't. And when you use mob is in your own spaces, like on your TikToks or your Facebooks or whatever you're on, Zoom or whatever, um, pull your document out and use it to as a guide to make sure you have a culturally safe space to talk with your mob. For example, if you're talking with your mob on say TikTok about your local area, don't let other mob into that space. Keep yourself culturally protected like that, if you know what I mean. Um, and yeah, just keeping it. You have the right to uphold and honour your cultural rights. It is your honor. It is your right to do that. And so this is why we want to get rid of this whole stigma out of the sovereignty movement, which is, in some regards, it's been good, and but some regards it has been damaging, because it was an invasion of cultural protocols from all over the place. It was a opportunity for white fellas to come flying into our cultural spaces using these kind of political pathways. So we are at where we're at. We can't, change that. I mean, we can move forward, but we're here now. And so what we want to do is put our foot down to cultural appropriation. It can't happen. The breach is, like I said before, I think last week, when if someone was to take something from someone else, it is, um, it has an impact. And also, I would like to question people's motives. Like, are we treating our tribal people like human beings? Because at the moment, it seems to be, on many occasions, that, oh yeah, some kind of, town folk or city mob can just go steal from tribal mob. Like, they don't matter. Like, they don't have feelings. Like, they don't mean anything to anybody. And that their voice is much more important representing that culture than the authentic people. So I really question the motive behind the people who are just blatantly going around stealing from tribal mob. I use racist question mark, because our tribal mob have human rights, they have cultural rights, just like the rest of us. So, and from that, I would like to close off. And next week, now we've covered everything, I would like to make this available, and please come onto the Vote No page, and we'll get a copy of this to you, and we'll try to make it public as much as we can. And thank you very much. And then next week we'll have some yarns. All right, I'll be in it.
You are.
Yeah. So I'm just going to come off Facebook first.